Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akiel and joining me today is CEO and co-founder of Deeploy, Maarten Stolk. We discuss a few things, some of which you might think are controversial. First one, bottom-up initiatives are meaningless. Without a strong vision, a dot on the horizon, top-down from leadership. Another one, the AI Act that the European Union has put into place is actually beneficial to all parties involved. And lastly, Maarten shares how he's building this AI hub here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and what the benefits are going to be. So enjoy. What made you start this AI hub or AI community in the first place?
I wouldn't say start. I think those things start to exist. So not giving myself all the credit or so. But if you talk especially about the physical location, I promised to myself, so I started together with my co-founders 2 other companies, and I promised to myself and also to my co-founders, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this if there's no demand for anything. If it is a hub or something else, if there's no proper demand, if nobody really wants this, I'm not going to spend any time on this because I have plenty of other things to do and that's already hard enough. But then we found that more and more people recognize that in the Netherlands we don't achieve a lot when it comes to AI at the moment, or data or infrastructure in general. So for me, that was the reason to start talking with a lot of founders, like what are the challenges you're facing at the moment? And in January, we decided to host a dinner together with a few other founders who were happy to spend some time on this. We found Tech Leap here to also be part of it. And there it was clear that everyone is in the end doing a bit their own thing in Eindhoven, in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, in Delft, in Heerlen, in so many different places in the Netherlands. Everyone is kind of doing their own thing. And that doesn't really work for AI because successful AI companies are scarce, I think. And you really need the top 0.001% of people that are both really smart and passionate about something related to AI and entrepreneurial enough. And if that's scattered across a pretty small country, then you won't really find each other. And I strongly believe that if you create one place where we are all together, where we can help each other, where we can help each other finding investment, where we can maybe invest in each other a bit, where successful startups will see spin-outs out of that company, then you create that flywheel. And with that flywheel, we'll create bigger and bigger companies. But without that flywheel, everyone keeps on doing their own small things, and yeah, that's not going to work. So the Polder model in that sense is and trying to do this in a fair and distributed way, I think that's not going to work for AI. Then we keep on thinking too small and we keep on acting too small. So for me, that was the main reason. And then a lot of people got quite enthusiastic about it, and that's good to see. So that motivated me to spend more time on this, to together with those other founders to start searching for a location, do negotiations, find out that the real estate world is a completely different world than the AI world. I'm not a big fan of it yet, so I'm not sure if I want to do it again. But that was the starting point for us. And what helped a lot for me is that with one of the companies we founded, Engines, we are based in both Utrecht but also in Berlin, and there we are based in the AI campus. So we actually see how it works to be with a lot of AI companies in the same space, to do meetups together, to basically help each other out, become each other's customers. We actually see it working there. So for us, that was like a great blueprint, what we can achieve here in the Netherlands as well, I think.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I like the start of how your thinking works in the first place. If there's no demand, then why spend any time on it at all?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? What's the purpose?
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, that's so. And in general, I think one of the things that I love being in tech as a software engineer is people share a lot with regards to knowledge, more so on the implementation side, more than anything else. Look, there was this problem. This is the context. This is how we solve it. They do that for free. Articles, blogs, podcasts, videos, conferences, meetups, everything like that. And this is kind of in the same vein, but then for AI startups with regards to challenges, funding, what problems are we solving, learning from each other, being each other's customers. Sounds really cool, man.
I think we need it. I think we have seen it before that it actually works. not even on purpose. Like we didn't create per se a fintech ecosystem in Amsterdam. There was not one person who said, let's create an ecosystem here. But it happens. It's whenever there are a few successful companies, you got spin-outs, you got more money in the ecosystem as well. I think that's what we lack here in the Netherlands now. If you talk about cloud infrastructure, data, and now AI as well, we kind of miss that. I can't name a lot of companies, at least, that started here, that have a lot of spin-outs in that vertical. And we see now the results of that, I think.
Gotcha. And you said NL is behind with regards to that flywheel and that ecosystem. Are there any countries that you say, okay, those are actually quite far ahead? Those are companies or countries to look up to with regards to their ecosystems?
Yeah, I think if you talk about ecosystems, it's more cities or basically cities or the large area around it. Of course, Paris and Berlin are the most obvious one, I think, in Europe, maybe next to London. You do see other successful companies in other smaller cities sometimes. So it doesn't have to be a physical ecosystem, I guess. But especially Paris is fascinating, I think. And it's good to realize that it didn't start like 5 years ago. It started 25 years ago. Station F was funded in the end by the founder of Scaleway. And Scaleway exists for like 25 years, I believe. So you see that Flywheel already started 25 years ago with investments and successful companies in cloud infrastructure. It didn't start yesterday. And I also don't believe like if we are going to shout really loud that we should push now, that doesn't work. There's a lot of groundwork. There's a lot of it takes decades often to really become very good in a certain industry as a country. That doesn't come overnight. And that's why I strongly believe in that ecosystem. If we get things together, if we start building more successful companies, that will lead to more successful companies, that will lead to another wave. So you need a flywheel to create new waves and become better in a certain industry, in this case AI.
I feel like you need a very strong vision on a long-term horizon to kind of realize what you need to do now and plant seeds with people, talk to people and really start creating this. Is that usually how you think, like more in the bigger picture, long-term vision?
I'm also very good to worry about things of yesterday.
On the day-to-day, yeah.
Definitely. And I do think you do need to realize that it takes long. I don't think it needs to be one person with a vision or so. I think especially these kind of things can be organically multiple people working towards something vaguely in like 5 or 10 years, and then new people will come and they work for another 10 years on something in the same direction. I think in that way, you create a strong ecosystem.
Yeah, I get that. What's your take on kind of how Netherlands and even EU is handling AI? Let's start with the EU AI Act.
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the few engineers who is actually quite in favor of the AI Act. I've seen so many organizations struggle to get beyond POC, MVP, innovation, PowerPoint, blah, blah. And the reason for that often is that someone in the organization at some point is going to say, yeah, that looks great, but we're not going to get this to production. And that's often because something is lacking, which is actually written down in the AI Act. It's either oversight, monitoring. It's either way too risky to get things beyond POC. And I think what we define now in the AI Act is quite a good set of rules and standards, which are going to lead to proper safeguards and help us to get AI beyond POC, to get AI to production level software and systems. So that's why I'm actually a big fan of it. It creates standards which help us to get AI in especially more regulated and high risk environments to production. And often the high risk stuff is also the high impact stuff. So that's the reason I'm quite a big fan of it. That I've seen that having the proper governance and the proper controls in place helps to get things beyond POC into production.
Yeah. Help me deepen this out for the people that don't know, because the EU AI Act categorizes different types of AI in different fields of industry, right? If it's education, it's different. If it's risk and financial management, it's different. If it's consumer facing, spam, or anything else, it's mainly the lower risk applications. And then you have different classifications with regards to what you need to adhere to.
True. Maybe first of all, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer or a legal specialist. So we actually give training together with our partners, and often they are more the legal specialist and we're more the technical person in the room. And we often joke that we always avoid doing anything legal because we hate it. And the other way around, they understand shit about engineering. But to summarize it in a way which is probably also more interesting for engineers, you do indeed have multiple categories. It's prohibited. Don't think about it. You're not going to do it anyway. I've hardly seen applications which fall in that category anyway. Then you have high risk, and that actually entails quite a few things. And to summarize it, is everything that has a high impact on human rights, on basically the rights you have and I have, which are also a strong part of EU regulation in general. And there are quite some articles which dictate what you have to do. Basically, the standards you have to take into account. So you have to explain, for example, where your data is coming from. You have to explain and you have to document how you think about bias or ethical considerations. You have to have proper controls in place. That's called human oversight in this case, or effective human oversight. So there are a few things which you need to do if it is a high-risk model or high-risk system in general. And I believe that those things you should be willing to do anyway. But it helps now to have a standard. Have like, okay, these 8 points with like sub-bullets are the things you have to do. And there's often software for that. There's a reason we started Deeploy is to basically make sure that you have all the tools in place to adhere to the things you need to do for anything that has some risk with it. And you should do that anyway, because if you don't do it and there wouldn't be an AI Act, you would still probably be in the news if you basically fuck up with a certain system. So I think it really helps to create a standard, and I don't really think it's going to block innovation.
Is that the main counter argument why people don't like it? That it's kind of putting the brakes on innovation? Because I agree with what you say. A framework can be a good thing, right? And now this is a legal framework, so it's kind of mandatory and you have to comply to it. But it's still a framework. And if those are a means to an end to create a good system, then it could be a good framework as well. But that's subjective.
Yeah, the only other thing that's going to happen if we don't have an AI Act is every single member state is going to bring up an own AI Act kind of version. You see the same now in the US. If you want to bring something to the US market, you have to adhere probably to the New York State regulation on AI, which is more about bias and ethical considerations and fairness. You have to comply to the one in Illinois. You have to comply to the one in California, which actually looks quite similar to the AI Act. So it's just a patchwork of different regulations, often also conflicting on some points. It's way harder, and the same is going to happen in Europe. Like France is probably going to protect tech companies, so they will be quite relaxed about a lot of things. But Italy doesn't, so Italy's going to be super strict on things. It's going to be a mess in the end, and then we're all going to complain like, "Yeah, it's such a mess in Europe. We need to harmonize things," and it's all over again the same thing. So I'm really happy we actually have some clarity. We have standards. It's going to help actually also because you will do those things anyway. Yeah, the opposite is exactly what I explained. It's basically what's happening in the US.
Yeah. Then I wonder why people are not a fan of it, right? If it's otherwise kind of, we don't have many other options and each country is going to do their own thing. There will be something, because I feel like people need to be protected towards the applications that they use, they consume, especially when they're more on the human rights side with regards to impact and mainly impact, I guess. So there will be something. So this might be the least of the evil, I guess.
Yeah, and I think so I do agree that we see large differences between the US and Europe, but I think it doesn't come from regulation per se. I think it has to do with the way we deal with regulation. So we can use it as an excuse. We can always use regulation as an excuse, like, I'm not sure if that's allowed by GDPR, AI Act, whatever you can think of. Or you can try to comply as good as possible in a practical way and just go ahead with innovation. And I have the feeling the latter happens in other parts of the world, but the first happens here. So if we can just use legislation as an excuse, we don't have to do anything. So it's easier. We have to work less. We have to spend less hours on the office. But that's more a cultural thing than anything related to regulation. So if we wouldn't have the AI, we would find another reason, or those people would find another reason not to innovate. So we have to fix the cultural part, which is the hardest part, by the way. But I think that's the thing we need to fix if we want to innovate quicker. But regulation itself, I think, is not the bottleneck.
You also mentioned that this might be a means to an end to help go from proof of concept to something that's actually production ready that people can use.
Yeah,
I've been in my previous assignment at a bank where I've seen many proof of concepts, but then they didn't comply to, let's say, the standards of the environment with regards to technology and what you can or cannot use. It was just proof of value. All right, we see this value. Now, can we do it with the tool set that we have? And then if it's a no, then it's kind of, there's stakeholder expectations there. There's an investment. There's no return on investment because the technology is not compliant. So it's very difficult to then go from proof of concept to something that is running an application in production. I don't know if many other, or at least from the organizations that you've been in and out of, are struggling with something similar when it comes to actually we see proof of value and then we're trying to go to production, but technology, yes or no, or we're behind, or there's a lot of risk and low risk appetite.
Yeah. I see those things a lot, of course, that I think it has to do with bottom-up versus top-down approach. A lot of organizations are hiring a few smart people, often very young, and they kind of have to figure out what they have to do with AI or data products, just build something, be innovative, experiment, whatever. And I never saw that really working. So if there's no pretty clear picture where you want to go to top-down in an organization, it doesn't work. It just ends up in MVPs and POCs and proof of value and whatever other names you want to give it, but it's not going to production because it's at the end of the day, it probably doesn't really fit in whatever strategic direction you are deciding to go to. So it's really also the responsibility of board level or whatever is leading an organization. It's their responsibility to really think about, okay, this is where we go to in like 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years. These are the products we need to get there. This is the reason we are doing it. And that can drill down to the rest of the organization. They can figure out how to build it. But in the end, I think you need to really have a good design where you want to be as an organization in like 3 or 5 years. Same as building houses or building suburbs. You also don't start bottom up, you start top down. You need to have a proper plan of a suburb, then a proper plan of how you build a house. And then you can actually start building bottom up. But otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah, maybe in Belgium, but in most countries that doesn't work.
Especially in some industries, leadership teams have always struggled with the role of tech, product, digital products. And now you have AI there as well. And you mentioned that this vision, this kind of dot on the horizon, where do we want to be as an organization? How do we leverage technology that's now out there, new, is now also their responsibility. It's quite challenging to, from my perspective, kind of see that take shape in some of the organizations or industries that I've been in. I do see people experiment bottom up, but then in the end, like you mentioned, the effect of that or the outcome of that might be that it doesn't reach production at all. But I do like the experimentation mindset, just within boundaries, I guess.
Absolutely. So my advice to more junior people in an organization, if you feel there's no direction, stop developing. Stop developing and start asking those questions, because it's never going to work. It's going to be very, very energy draining, I think, if you work on something for 6 months and it's going to be thrown away. And the other way around, if you're really on top in an organization, if you're on the board, if you're a director or whatever. And then you have the feeling that for some reason you don't really understand what you're working on, or you don't really understand anything about digital products, data, AI. Either find that person and give him a board seat, or start learning how it works and start gaining knowledge about it. But doing neither and hope that bottom-up stuff is going to happen, I haven't seen it working for the past 15, 20 years. And it's not going to work in the upcoming years either if you don't have a vision.
Yeah.
And I see that also if you talk about other geographies. I see younger people actually leading companies than in most parts of Europe. We tend to have pretty old people in board seats, especially outside of the Netherlands. I think the Netherlands is not doing that bad, but I've seen statistics of that. And the average age is just pretty old also here of people running companies.
And that's a bad thing, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you need a few younger people sometimes as well in the top of an organization.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to get there yet. Except like this, you start something from scratch with years, and then you're also old by the time you have something of scale and you get there.
There are really, really big companies in the US where the CFO is like 35 years old.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really helpful.
Incredible. Yeah, I get that. What do you think of when people say culture eats strategy for breakfast? Because I've been in a lot of environments where people really kind of hamper on their culture, to a point where indeed they might not even have a strategy. And then sometimes it just feels like anarchy.
I don't know. I think it goes hand in hand. If you write something down but it's not lived, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you never write something down and it's all captured in your culture, it also doesn't scale, at least. Like there's a lot of unclarity. We at Deeploy, we have We have a hybrid model, so people come to the office, and that helps in culture, and also work at home. Hence, we need to write things down. And I have a lot of respect for companies who are remote only, because then you have to write things down. Culture is pretty hard in the end. You can work around it, but it's really hard. So you have to write things down, and that strategy, I think, is super, super important. Vision, mission, strategy, goals, targets, etc. And if you're always in the office, I think the culture is really important. I see that here when I walk around in the office. Yeah, culture is super important. And both ways can work. But I think if you have some kind of hybrid model, it also goes hand in hand to have both strategy and culture pretty much aligned in that sense.
Yeah. You mentioned that bottom-up initiatives and bottom-up experimentation, it just doesn't go anywhere without a strong vision, right? And then, at least from my perspective, you can experiment within those boundaries and see if the outcomes are a means to an end in the end, if they help the business, the company, the organization, and the group of people, because organizations are still just groups of people, reach whatever their vision is, or at least take a right step towards that.
But it's super easy, I think. I just don't understand why it's so difficult.
It sounds complex to me.
You define where you want to be 5 years from now. That should be doable for most board members, I guess. You drill down what initiatives need to be taken.
Yeah.
And you see where AI or data or digital products fit in.
But how do you take people along with you, right? If there's a vision where they don't see themselves, you lose them.
That's true. So that's easy also in smaller companies, of course. I think the more you go to them, the more you can involve people.
Yeah.
And I think in any way you can involve them. But in the end, I think clarity needs to come from a few people in the end. If you don't provide that clarity, everyone is swimming a bit in the end.
Yeah.
Which is super frustrating.
The thing that I've seen the most, and this is indeed coming from board level in organizations, is we see companies doing stuff with AI. We need to do something. Like there's this sense of urgency that just trickles down. And there's like, we need to act something with AI. On the product sense, embed Gen AI into whatever we have. But they don't even use Gen AI. It's just AI everything. Everything that's under this umbrella of AI. Doesn't matter if it's predictive AI or generative AI. That's one. And then there's the second one, which is more for the people that already have a lot of software engineering capabilities. We need to be more efficient with regards to how we use AI so we can improve our output, regardless of whatever outcomes we're trying to achieve. We need to optimize the efficiencies and stuff like that. Those are the two. And then especially if there's no good framework, if there's no good story, if even the people that communicate that are lacking in communication skills or even sometimes just charisma, they lose the buy-in. There's then a bottom-up kind of challenge and pushback on, okay, we don't even have tools available. How do you want us to work with AI? Or how are we going to be enabled in this mismatch in expectations? And then it just sandwiches, and middle management is trying to middle manage.
Oh, yeah, great. But maybe to turn it around and make it positive, I've seen really, really good examples as well. That's the fortunate part of working on something like Deeploy, is that your early adopters are the ones that actually have a strong vision, that actually know where they want to be in 2 years from now, that actually are growing really quickly, that understand that efficiency is super important. The ones that understand that having a few killer AI features, AI products in the offering is going to be super important. So it's fascinating to see them operating actually. They are actually really growing quickly because they do define where what they need in like 1 or 2 years from now. So I would just turn around and look at the ones that grow quickly, what they are doing. And often they're quite open to talk about it. They often share quite a lot of things. But those are actually really interesting to watch, I think. And you don't have to do that only in the Netherlands, but if you look in, for example, the UK and how fintech and also insurtech now is taking over quite a big market share from the incumbents in the market, you can learn a lot from them. And it's super interesting, I think, to see how they are operating at the moment.
Can you elaborate on that? You said already it starts with a strong vision of where do you want to be in 1 or 2 years, but what are they doing that is exceptional that allows them to excel in that way?
It's not even exceptional, I think. It's so if you think about it, it's not even, I think it's not that they actually spend time, I think, on defining where they want to be in 1 or 2 or 3 years. And they do quite some sessions, I think, together with their colleagues on discussing and arguing where that's going to be. So if you talk about banking, for example, and neobanks, you see that they basically take the whole process. Every company is a little factory in the end. They take the whole process and define, and every step of the process, they define here and here and here and here. We feel that with relatively small investment, we can actually make things much more efficient or much more effective, or basically make a business case in the end that scales. And that's what they are doing. They basically make a blueprint of how a bank works, and then find all the places where they are more efficient or more effective, or can create new products and new offerings which are, which they expect is going to be demand for. So that's what they're basically doing. And that's often what's lacking in other organizations. So if you're going to do the same thing, I'm 100% sure that also with the right people in the organization, but often you need less people than what you think, you can actually achieve the same thing. And that's why I mentioned fintech and insurtech in the UK. They are much further than here. They often have already much bigger market share. And you can learn quite a lot by looking at their presentations, meetup, slides, those kind of things. We can learn a lot from that, I think.
How much can you still gather from this kind of competitive analysis? Because you mentioned, okay, look at your own organizations, look at whether it's process journeys or customer journeys or workflows that you have, and see where kind of the most time is spent, where you can make a solid business case, where you can rely on technologies like these to be more effective in what you do, right? That's very much, I feel like, looking at your organization in a nutshell and trying to optimize in that way. What I've seen other organizations do is they see what someone has created in certain output. It might be chatbot is always the kind of go-to example. If someone sees a chatbot, they can be like, okay, well, we can actually also do that. And it's kind of plug and play, but it might not be the best for their organization or for their consumer base or for the branding in the first place. But that's what they do. I feel like what you mentioned in looking at your own organization, that's kind of the better way to do it. But how much can you then still learn from your competitors?
I think how much time they spend on making the blueprint, that's something you can learn from them. The exact blueprint or the exact use cases, that's something I think you can better define yourself. Because every bank is slightly different with different kind of customers, different kind of offering, different market positioning. So you have to make your own blueprint in the end. But the fact that you have to make a blueprint, that you have to think about it, that's something you can learn from them, I think.
Yeah.
If they have time to spend hours and days on defining where they want to be in a few years from now, I think also other organizations can do that. It's basically prioritizing innovation and the stuff of the future over everything that happens yesterday.
It feels like there's no easy answer, and you just have to go through the motions and step by step kind of figure out where the value is for your own context and for your own organization. People are looking for a quick win, though, especially.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, but that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the thing I'm trying to tell here is, just saying that we have to push something very quickly is often a very stupid strategy. That I hardly ever saw that working.
No. What are some of the implementations or integrations that you've seen that were actually incredibly valuable? Is there something you can share in that aspect? Some of the AI features that you have seen go live and actually have impact?
Yeah, I think it's good to distinguish different kind of AI applications. And so you got a few AI applications which are basically in the current process, often predictive AI, not even generative AI. But every process that is super repetitive, fraud detection or claim handling or so at an insurance company, or whatever. So many of those repetitive tasks. If you see a repetitive task which is done by people at the moment, which is slightly more complex than normal automation, it's often a very good candidate for machine learning and AI. If you talk about creating stuff which is based on facts, that's also, of course, very easy to use. Actually, at Deeploy, we are now working with a US company which is doing quite a lot of our development work, which is, I think, super fascinating to see how the learning curve is going. So also with development work, you can even go beyond Copilot. You can actually work with companies that take over quite large chunks of your whole development work because you have the context, you have the code base, you have basically all the documents you can give your own developers. You can give that also to AI. And with all the guardrails they already have built and have in place, you can actually automate quite a lot of development work, not as an assistant, but actually taking over your development work. So we see that working on our own organization as well. But all the other more repetitive stuff, I would also have a look at it. But all of them, in the end, require all the guardrails and the governance we talked about. If you want to go into the direction, invest in all the groundwork and all the infrastructure around it to do it in a good way. I think it's never a waste of money. It's the same as investing in cybersecurity 15 or 20 years ago. Whenever you want to go fully digital, you do need those guardrails basically to go beyond, just some experimentation work.
Yeah. You mentioned there's did I understand that correctly? There's a company helping you with the development work that you have on Deploy itself as an application.
Yeah. So of course everyone is using Copilot, etc. But that's not really taking over all your development and work in the end.
That's just someone piloting. Yeah.
You're still operating an AI system. We actually create, we are basically doing the design work, defining what we need, and then send it off to another company, and they do all the work until a merge request, and then we accept it or review it at least.
Gotcha. But isn't that your core? Isn't it scary to
super scary.
Give that, or have that in collaboration with someone else, but it's working?
It's also interesting because we have to think even better about the design.
Yeah.
We have to think even better about the requirements. And we have to review it even better than before. But it actually creates better code.
Does it? A lot of companies invest in how much their development team understands the business, understands the product, right? Because then you can think along, understanding why we do things makes you challenge what we need to do in the first place. And then if the requirements don't make sense from your lens, also looking at diversity, then you can challenge that. But I feel like with this construction, you might miss that. Yet you're still saying kind of quality-wise, we have seen increased.
For some, so I do get your point. There's also the worry we have. So if it is, if it requires a lot of context and expert knowledge, it's harder. Then it often doesn't really work yet.
Yeah.
Although we can, the more we do with them, the more context they have, so the better they will understand it as well. But if it is a feature which is pretty well scoped upfront and has less of those business context on it, is actually quite doable. And because we are not doing the development work itself for that feature, we actually are more critical in the review. We're actually more critical in the design. So it actually creates better features.
Interesting. Is this like an agency or a consultancy that does this construction?
I don't know how to classify it. We discussed it actually. Is it a supplier? Is it outsourcing? Is it an AI tool?
Is it a freelancer?
It's a combination of those things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Zooming into AI features in production, you mentioned a few things with regards to effectiveness and efficiency. What are some of the things that, if you're talking about a production system, needs to be there with regards to observability? I talked to Saurabh earlier, and he has a very distinct view on AI in operations, let's say. But I'm wondering what your take is. What are the metrics that I need to think of, or what do I need to have in observability to be in control?
That's a good question. It depends a bit, again, on the type of application, also the type of technology you're using, if it's generative AI or predictive AI. I actually listened to the podcast you made with Saurabh, so I'm trying to recall everything now. I think what is, so you can measure all the technical aspects, both the more, the metrics around traffic, but also the ones which try to capture performance. But it's a bit like your critical question like 2 minutes ago. A lot of things are more, require more context and simple statistics. So we at Deeploy strongly believe that one of the biggest things you need to measure, one of the most important things you need to measure, is some kind of feedback loop, either directly or indirectly. So indirectly could be that you choose the second option or start arguing with an LLM. There's also a kind of feedback loop. But having some kind of feedback loop and monitoring the feedback loop and act on it whenever you see that things get worse, or when in a certain subcategory you see more feedback, could mean that the system is biased on some subgroup. I think that's the most important thing you need to measure next to all the statistical stuff and all the technical stuff. The real thing you need to measure is in the end human feedback, because that's basically the interaction between humans and machines, or human and AI systems. And that's often pretty easy in practice to measure. If it is a predictive AI model, it could be feeding back actuals or feeding back expert opinions or overrules. If it is a generative AI system, it's basically all the arguing that is happening between an LLM and a human being, or overruling decisions, or trying to correct things. Those things are all forms of feedback. And if you can feed that back via an API and start measuring that, then you can act whenever you see that things don't really work in certain applications or certain subgroups, or it's getting worse over time, or it's getting better. That's the positive side. I think that's the most important one, because a lot of things are not captured in statistics.
Yeah. I really like that. Like the only Gen AI feature that I worked with, in the end, it was going to make people more effective. So work that they were doing, spending hours on it. We had something that would pre-fill a form. Instead of them doing the work, they would kind of have their own position of reviewing. And I saw a lot of people talk about, okay, if the answer is correct, then in the end it's correct, right? And we can even have a model to say if what a person changed, if the intent was exactly the same. And for me, is the fact that someone already changed it, if it's not the way they like it or the way they want to kind of have their work be put forward, because that goes in a whole chain and other people are going to see it, it's not good enough, right? It's kind of this user acceptance that also needs to take part of that, which I think is interesting.
And I think that we still call it explainability, but it's more than just Shep or Lime or whatever. But explainability or support for a certain decision or certain output is super important as well. So if you talk about an LLM giving the support for certain outcomes, it's super important because the outcome can be good. It can be a good recommendation for something, but the reason behind it could be completely wrong. So I think that support is also important to make sure you capture the feedback about the reasoning as well, which is harder for an LLM because asking it for an explanation is not an explanation of the model itself or the underlying technology.
No,
it could be just as well hallucination.
Yeah. Reasoning with regards to why an answer is the answer it is, I think is incredibly challenging. But if you have a good way and it also makes sense from a user perspective continuously, then I feel like you have a great outcome.
I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion for the upcoming years. But it's basically the discussion between closed source systems, AI systems, and open source models. I'm not sure which one is going to be leading in a few years from now. So you see open source getting closer to closed source. But you also see that the business value of it is pretty small at the moment to be more open about which code you use, which data you use, etc. But if we go more towards, or if we demand more transparency, then it could be that we, in the end, move more towards using open source models for repetitive tasks or for certain use cases. And with open source models, LLMs, you can to a certain extent explain why a certain outcome was the way it was, like which tokens were important, for example, or saliency of a certain outcome. And I think that can help to really understand why LLMs are doing some really strange stuff sometimes, better than just asking for an explanation.
Yeah.
So if transparency is getting more important, if control on source code is getting more important, if IP is getting more important, then we might move back towards more open source systems. If we, for some reason, decide that it's not important, then we probably stay working with closed source systems. And it means that we have less transparency. We have to rely on the explanation we get from those providers.
Right now, like those are, I think, big ifs. And I could see them, I have assumption on the way they are going. But are there any incentives to use open source versus closed source currently?
Yeah, we see that quite a bit in health tech. You don't want data to be shared to those really large tech companies. You do want to have more controls. You do want to really go deep into the LLM system itself. You probably want to use smaller language models. Still pretty big, of course, but smaller language models because you have simply more control on what's happening. So there we actually see quite some companies working with their own open source LLMs, which they fine-tune in their own use case because they simply have more control on what's happening.
Interesting.
And I think the same will happen for other high-risk use cases.
Yeah. Is it, because I haven't experimented as much with open source variants. I don't know if they need to be self-hosted. For me, closed source model is just an API call away, and that's it. And if it's compliant within the organization, then we use it. And we have experimented with other open source models, but I haven't had any hands-on experience. Do people usually self-host it, or how much expertise is needed to get that up and running? Do you know?
Yeah, I've seen it with some companies. It differs a bit, I think. But it is, of course, way more investment in the end to make that work. So the ones I mentioned are often focusing on one single use case, which is basically the company in the end as well. So they provide a certain service in a certain step of certain process. So if you talk about healthcare, they're doing like one care pathway or two care pathways, and they optimize a model for that. And that on itself is already a big enough business case to run a company on. So if that's your whole company, then it makes sense to provide all the guardrails. But if you want to scale that to like all the care pathways or use it in healthcare in general, then I think it's going to be super, super complex and it's requiring a lot of money, a lot of investment. But the other way around, just relying on a big US company to do that for you is also not the way forward, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, it does require quite some investment in multiple different ways. But it's also the only way forward, I guess, in those use cases. So especially in healthcare, I think you do want to make sure that you understand why systems make certain decisions, and hence you do need to have access to source code. So that's what we at least see. But in all honesty, if I touch code within Deeploy, I think our developers are going to kill me. So
for me, like government, healthcare, if you're saying like these are the typical use cases, it's quite specialistic work. But then the people that want to work in those environments, they might not want to work in healthcare, governments, because it's also like slower organizations, very slow moving, people that have been there for 20 years and are part of the walls, let's say, and they don't have the same experimental or innovation mindset that other startups might have. So it's kind of this chicken and egg problem. I don't know how to get out of that yet. I feel like we do need innovation in specifically those fields, but the way we've been doing it so far is just not effective.
Yeah, and like these kind of innovations often start with things being under pressure. So in healthcare, we will run into a point where it's simply not affordable anymore. And I think that will make it easier in the end to innovate. That will help letting organizations make decisions. That has to do with risk. So if we don't want to take risk, then it's hard to innovate. At some point, we need to take the risk because if you don't make that decision, then the decision is basically, okay, we can't provide healthcare for anyone, or not for everyone anymore. So I think because both government and healthcare is probably under pressure over the upcoming decades in Europe, we will make decisions which tend towards innovation, and will become easier to innovate, and will become easier to build companies in that industry. But I completely realize that at the moment, it's super, super, super hard to build a health tech company or a med tech company or a company which is providing software to the government, not consultancy, but actual software. It's super hard.
Which is strange, right? Because in your scenario, there's like, okay, there's this building pressure, which means we don't have an option anymore and we have to. It's like back against the wall. Whereas now, I feel like we still have time. Yet it's not working as well as it should. But right now would be the best time.
It's the best time for a lot of things. But we wait till it's almost too late and then we start innovating. But it has to do with our personal horizon, I think. Do you know what you're going to do in 5 years from now?
No, I hate that question. I hate that. Whenever you've been talking about these long timeline horizons, and I'm like, oh my God, like I have no clue.
Most people don't, I think.
Yeah.
So they're not optimizing for the long term.
Do you? Like, do you have that strong vision for you as a person or even you as a company?
I am my girlfriend at home. She often finds it very annoying that I'm thinking ahead for quite some years.
Quite some.
Because it makes it less romantic, I guess.
Yeah. So both personally and professionally, it's something you do.
Yeah, I also like it. Maybe it's a bit of dreaming sometimes about some stuff as well. But I think it can also be really important to at least have some vague idea where you are in a few years from now. And it would indeed be helpful to do that with the government, in healthcare, with hospitals, in the financial system, because they're also going to be under pressure. We talked a bit about fintechs and insurtechs, which are definitely going to take market share. So I think it's going to be crucial for them as well to put innovation high on the agenda and not on like an afterthought on Friday afternoon. Also for them is going to be critical, but probably you will see that when it's almost too late, people really start to innovate.
Yeah, people will move. Yeah,
and that happened over the past decades or centuries as well, I think, over and over again.
I can see that. Yeah. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Maarten. It's fascinating. The way you think, the way you have a strong vision and kind of are driving forward this community in NL and Amsterdam specifically. I'm going to look forward to it. We'll keep in touch.
Hopefully it's going to be successful.
Hopefully it's going to be successful. We'll see as we go. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Thanks a lot.
This was a blast. We'll round off here. Thank you so much for listening. If you're still here, let us know in the comment section what you thought of this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.